and it is now just a couple minutes past 7:30, and we will welcome everyone to the Seven Seas Cruising Association, Seven Seas University. We're doing a free broadcast. We got it started again after it being dark for just a little bit, and we are currently doing them free and gratis for our members. Many of them can't sail right now, Sue and I included. And so we're doing this as a service to all of our membership. I hope you can take advantage of it. I wanted to also make a advertisement, if I could, for Seven Seas Cruising Association. We're a community of like-minded cruisers, and we really need to keep bringing in new cruisers. We do not have the money to advertise, and we are basically a volunteer organization that we seek others that care about cruising. And I'm reminded of the many cruisers here that have cruised far more than Sue and I have in our 40,000 mile cruising. And it's just wonderful. The new people, though, that are just joining, that have not cruised extensively before, are just as valuable, and we're very happy to have them starting and joining. Anyway, if you know someone that is not a member, if you can solicit them to join at SSCA.org, there is a joining link right at the start of our webpage, and we'd be most grateful, and it'll help us all keep our organization going. We are doing very well this year, despite all the roadblocks that can be put in front of us. Anyway, tonight's show is going to be exploring Europe and the trip from London to London, which Angel Louise took, and also the trip from London all the way to Spain, which was in Morocco, that was taken by King and Sue before they returned to the United States. Anyway, we'll take questions at the end, and we'll have some suggestions, maybe solutions for people that are interested in the future. This is a picture of our boat, Angel Louise. You can see we have it registered in Cruise Bay, but she's never actually been in Cruise Bay. It's been right next door, but we've never been able to find a spot to anchor there. So we've usually taken a national park mooring right next to it or been next by. After we got our boat to London, going up the Thames River, it's a 2-day trip up the Thames River, and you know you're at St. Catherine's Dock when you get up and you can see the Tower Bridge, and you time it, call them in advance, and time it so that you arrive during the 4 or so hours that there's enough tide to get into their basin. Here's a picture that you can see that shows up in the top. The blue is the location. There are 3 different basins that can take a maximum of about 155 boats at the last I heard. And it is just a wonderful, wonderful place to stay in England. We recommend St. Catherine's Dock, even though it is a little bit pricey. You are in the middle of some of the most expensive real estate in London. Right down to the bottom left of your screen, you can see the Tower of London. And if you take a look, you can see Tower Bridge straight ahead of you. King, are you signaling? No, okay. I saw King's hand, I misinterpreted. Anyway, we think that this is just a wonderful spot. This was the largest city in the world just 100 years ago, and it's still a center of banking for the world as well. I can't compare it with anything else. There's also, if you go further down the Thames, there's a place that is called Limehouse, and it is part of the canal system. If you go in there, we have heard of people that have had to meet their requirements for how your boat had to be handled and how the gas had to be handled and everything else. We never found those problems in St. Catherine's Dock. And that's because it's a canal boat dockage. This is the London Tower Bridge. you can see from St. Catherine's docks. This is looking over the slip where you come in. It's the place where the Queen of England keeps her barge. She has a bunch of rowers, but they have a big diesel in it too. So anyway, it's one of the boats that's kept there. The late Frank Sinatra's boat is still in St. Catherine's dock. Beautiful boat. Anyway, if it was good enough for the Queen, it was good enough for King and Sue. And there's ostinato in the slips coming in. Those locks, when you come in them, they carry you up about 20, it varies between 23 to 28 foot above sea level, as I recall. I may be off and King can correct me. But you go, it has a lock behind you and you go in and they assign you your place. This is Angel Louise. We loved the winter while we were in London, and just we had English TV, hooked up our TV, had a heater and 2 dehumidifiers in the boat for the winter, and it was just delightful. Temperatures never really got below the mid 30s. We did get snow one time while I was there. I think King had maybe more than that. There's the snow we got, but as Iowans, we call this frost instead of snow.
It's a catamaran.
Here is a picture that King took that showing a large duck coming through the bridge. You have to schedule the bridge opening, I believe, 24 hours in advance. But then after you get through that, there's really nowhere else to go because London Bridge is the next bridge, just a short distance upriver from there. One of the things you can do, and King had this picture, I'd forgotten about it. We're going down, you can see all the moss on the side. The river comes up this high, and Sue and I went mudlarking. When the water goes down in the Thames, you can go down and you can walk on the very bottom of it and see things that are there from the 1600s. They have pipes that were sold during the time of King James, that we found a number of them. And that's how they sold their tobacco at the time. You couldn't do it any other way. The problem is you've got to get out of the river quickly when it starts to come back up, and there's only a few places to go in and out, so you've got to be careful. I'll go forward from here. We're greatly inspired. I'm not going to play it, but there is a poem on YouTube of Ithaca that Sean Connery performs, and it's wonderful. And I'd recommend you to play it at some time if you've got the time. We elected to seek our Ithaca, and his suggestion was, Mr. Cafferty, the author of it, was hope that your journey takes a long time. You're not in a hurry. This was before Schengen, however. We waited until 2012. We arrived in 2011. We loved London, couldn't say enough about it. But eventually we decided in the spring of 2012 to leave. We were too wide for the canals. We originally planned to do the canals through France, but we found out we had a foot too much width on us. And we decided to go through the rivers all the way to the other end of to the Black Sea. We were the first boat known to have done a complete circle through the international rivers, through the North Sea, the Rhine, the Main, and down the Danube to the Black Sea, and then through the Sea of Marmara, and all the way on both sides of the Mediterranean, and all the way back up to London. And I'm clicking on people and it makes things stop. It's very dangerous. There were 2 people killed in the spring of the year before we were, and they died in the Loreley Gap, and that was extremely busy and always has been, and it's very rocky, and they have not had anything they could do to make it safer. It is a main tributary for commercial vessels. 40% of the goods that move in and out of Switzerland go through the Rhine. We were warned our engines might not be strong enough. You've got to go through before the 1st of June or about the 1st of June, but it's very difficult. EU has its own government, just like the United States. They have an EU government. England has just left it with their Brexit. But one of the things we needed was an international certificate of competence. You don't legally have to do everything that people tell you to do. You have to have a 70 certificate where you give signage knowledge. Have to have a special VHF radio, and you have to have passport and visas. As I say, you don't have to do everything, but it's a bit like the Marines. They can't make you do it, but they can make you wish you'd done it. We opted because they would not do any honoring of our US Coast Guard certificates. We both have Merchant Mariner certificates, but we took a course, and I think it cost $400 at the time for each of us to show we knew how to tack a sailboat and how to operate a boat with motors. This is the last renewal that we have. And it also allows you to be a pilot on all European rivers. We were never asked for it except leaving Serbia, but had we not had it, we could have been required to leave our boat in Serbian waters and hire a pilot to take it out. The other thing that's a concern in making the trip is the Schengen Treaty. Doesn't bother many tourists, but cruisers can have some difficulty. Again, they can't make you follow their rules, but they can make you wish you'd followed them. It's binding in 27 countries. It does not include England, and it does not include Gibraltar. It basically says if you are in any place in those 27 total, that total more than 90 days in 6 months, you are an illegal alien and you can be deported. And you'd be much like some of the people that come in from south of the border here. It doesn't matter if you've got a car in the United States and you're an illegal alien, you'll be deported or can be deported, and that's the same thing there. There's a link in the United States State Department. So if you go to state.gov, you can find the best information on the Schengen matters. Anyway, that's a very big concern. We had to learn to drive rivers because we were ocean and lake sailors originally, but basically one of my friends said, you want to drive your boat like a barge captain because the inside banks, you'll find silt and sandbars, and just is a problem. The faster and deeper water is always on the outside, but that's also where you'll find the other boats. But the right-of-way under England rules, if you get on the Rhine River, you never have the right-of-way. The right-of-way always goes to the others. On the European rules, yes, exactly. And my wife Sue is here too. I don't know if you can see her, but she captained 50% of the time and was in charge of the boat during those times. Your AIS, if you have a AIS, that is used more than the radio we found on all of the rivers. And you can track where the commercial ships go, and even far ahead when you're on a river that is flooded and there are no channel markings, you can get an idea where the safe channel is. We finally learned to make waypoints up to 5 miles ahead of us, so we had an invisible route. Our navionics charts at that time showed us where the river was, but it just showed the two banks and no depths in between. Let's see if I can get this to go forward. The other thing I recommend is definitely have a GPS, and I'd recommend a transmitting GPS. This is a picture crossing, what did I say? I said GPS.
AIS.
Yes, AIS, an active AIS. This shows a picture off of our Ray Marine, and it's a B, Class B. All the commercial ships have a Class A, and much greater distances. We find ours is just a little more than 5 miles distance. We can be received by other boats, but we can see them much further. But this is a picture taken crossing the English Channel, and you can see boats coming both ways. I liken it a bit to trying to cross an interstate and trying to get a baby buggy across a 6-lane interstate. This makes it much easier. Boat preparations, again, in Europe, you're going to find 50 cycles instead of 60 in the US, and it's going to be a higher voltage, 220 in all the places you go. We carried our mast and also had our GPS on. We replaced lights. We carried a ton of extra lines, bought a couple of means to cut the lines and had them ready all the time. We ended up doing 76 locks. So we needed fender boards, plenty of fenders. The other thing in Europe we bought when we were there was this gas boat adapter, and it will connect American gas to any place in the world, and gives you some peace of mind that you won't end up having a cold boat. Many places use butane, and some people convert their boats over to use butane, but it is very, very difficult if it gets very cold. Planning necessities, we recommend a dictionary. The river uses the language of German almost everywhere. We ended up buying the ones from Lonely Planet. And again, the AIS. This shows one of the Lonely Planet guides. You can get the paper guide for, I think, $7 and maybe $7.99. I'm not sure. Anyway, it has things if you want to read that. We ended up carrying, and they were cheaper at the time, they were $3.98, and we bought something like 10 different language books in PDF. The first page would have 10 different phrases that you could say for greetings and to ask for help. And we found a smile, and the key words are, "Can you help us?" And that just seems to melt people in any language, and they understand it. We'd also always speak to them first in their language and greet them before we'd ask them any questions, because other people consider that to be bad. There's also an app that you can use if you want people to see you on the marine traffic device, and it is called MAIS, and we use that extensively. And it lets you, when you have connection through your satellite phone or through your Wi-Fi, it will connect up and it will give your position and show it on marine traffic, even though your AIS won't. We took our boat north to the Hamble River, Fox's Marina, cleaned the bottom, did a bunch of work to fix it up, and proceeded to travel then across the English Channel, barfing our way across because it was bad, but we had to get there and we had no time left to wait. Anyway, I've got 2 more to admit here. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. And crossing the English Channel, we crossed at night. It wasn't quite as busy, and we thought it might be a little bit calmer, and it really wasn't a problem. And we went, stayed for a couple days in Amsterdam, and then went north up to
the Netherlands.
Up to Lelystad in the Netherlands. Your microphone may be on, Suzanne. You might mute it if that's possible. And we stopped and went down into the original Zuider, what's now called, I guess it's not the Zuider Zee, it's just the Zuider. Anyway, I guess that's south. Anyway, we went down and we had to remove our mast and put it on top. We hired a couple people to lift it. I went up, took the mast down, trusting Sue. We took pictures of everything to keep track of how everything was connected so we could put it back together when we got to the other end of Europe. We did not want to ship it because we'd heard reports of thefts at the far end. So this is the picture with the mast down, lowered onto specially built places at the marina. We have some of their admissions. And let me click here. And you can see here, it's a big, this is stuff you could build a bridge with. And then after we had that, we bought 500 yards of small, I don't know if it was number 8 line that we lashed everything everywhere, so there was no way it could ever fall off. And here you can see the picture from the front. We don't have the other lines fastened on it yet. We went to one of the distributaries. There's 3 ways the Rhine River dumps all of its water out of Europe into the North Sea. And on the north, by Lelystad, is the Isel River, and it goes inland to the town of Arnhem. We took that. It's very pretty. This is Lelystad. It was a beautiful harbor, fabulous food, wonderful place to stay. It had some fabulous structures here. This was one of their artistic things outside the city. And you go through the bridges into the Isel River, and you go downstream. Finally, this is taken at Arnhem. This is a few miles short of the Danube River, excuse me, short of the Rhine River. And Judy Meckham asked, well, why did I have my OCC flag up and not my SSCA flag up? And that's a fault of mine. Mine was a little bit tattered at the time, and I don't know, I just didn't have enough space and forgot about it. Anyway, Arnhem was famous because of all the paratroopers that landed there in a Bridge Too Far, a movie that's still very popular on TV. And one of the churches there still celebrated the paratroopers that gave their lives parachuting into Arnhem and showed in honor of those that died trying to free Holland, which had been neutral in the prior to the war. This is the trip on the canal going down to the Rhine. And you can see all the traffic on below. If you see the one that's going horizontal left and right, those are all ships on the Rhine. And up above, you can see the little one with a green line in front of it. That's our course, the blue showing the wind. And we are making our way to get on to the Rhine. And here we're getting on. There were, I think, 3 or 4 boats that were operating very near us. And since we had no right of way, we were very, very nervous at the time.
Okay.
And you can tell the ones that are families because you can see the pictures of the playpens on the back. And Sue noted that the ones that there were
They just
families.
left Arnhem and they're on the Rhine now, up the Lelystad River and that,
Someone's got their mic on. Anyway.
This is the park traffic on the Rhine now. Where?
I hope I'm still getting out. Will you check?
Yeah, we went twice to Arnhem.
Okay, check and make sure it's still getting sound out. I've tried to mute everyone here, so that may work. Anyway, we had a problem because we needed to make sure we could get fuel all the way, and that was very difficult. We went when it was just close to 6 feet over the regular length. Am I getting, okay. A huge amount of commercial traffic. It's not a pleasure river. Again, a family. And Sue said you can tell the ones where there's a woman aboard, they'll have the curtains up. We were docked at this little floating fuel stop just right on the Rhine out of Arnhem. This large boat parallel parked right in front of us. That's the same boat coming in. We proceeded on to Duisburg. This is the spot that started World War II, where the Germans moved into it and was the scene of the start of the hostilities. Going up the river, you could see we were next to the side, big, huge cargoes coming by us all the time. We just hugged the weirs that are all along the side just to make sure we could get through. You can see the green pole here. Here, the water, the weir is tall enough that we're there, but we found if we stayed in the bubbling water, we had enough speed and power that at maybe 1 knot, we could get by it. Some of them, the water was coming over the top and you wanted to make sure. But even though we were right next to it, we had a concern, and here you can see them all in a row coming up here. We at one point looked over our shoulder and you can see the green, same green end of the weir with one of the vessels that's following us. They had the right of way and they tended to try and hug that too because there was much more current and resistance in the middle. But they did pass us and we didn't have problems with them. We figured that they would have, it's like going through New York City, they'd have more paperwork and they wouldn't want that. Anyway, we're proceeding up the river at this point. You can see one of the barges, huge barges on their way up to Switzerland. And that little black thing there were occasionally, you'd find little people in a kayak among the vessels that you had to keep out a watch for. Here it shows the current. We are going upstream against this. Boats can slip down a board on their boat and it says, instead of going port to port, you go to my other side. We ended up finding we could not do this as we were going maybe 1 knot most of the time when we were in the worst of the current. And these boats, 300-foot boats, we figured we'll just let them avoid us. But we would get the binoculars out. Sue would say, no, there's no blue board down. And then ultimately, they'd flip it down. No fun. This is the Dusseldorf. There's a marina, just a dock there. We pulled in there overnight, but we didn't. That's the first and only marina. I think we, maybe the second marina we came in coming up the river. And there's Angel Louise. There are no large boats like most of our members have. We were proceeding down. You can see going toward Cologne, and we'll go down to Cologne and Bonn. And one of the other problems are the ferries that go across all the time. Finally, we're getting into the mountains. And this is one of the boats that we saw that made us convinced that we could make this journey. It's one of the bicycle tours that run along the river. And you're right next to the houses in some places. People want to be on the water. This is a ferry boat, tour boat that was in one of the places, I think near Cologne. And then this is the bridge at Remagen. In World War II, this was the bridge that American troops got across and secured, even though explosive charges had been set on it and they were shooting at them while they're crossed. But ultimately they got across, and about 10 days later, the bridge collapsed from the damage. And at the top, there's a graveyard, and you can see the cross. The German commander was executed without any honors because he let the bridge fall.
Wow.
This is a pegel, which is where they test the height of the river, and you can get those reports as you're going through the location. I have to check here for our admittances. Okay, we're good. There were lots of these little docks, but these are docks that can be used by the ferry companies. There were no little ways for us to have a day dock like many of the US cities where you could go in for an hour or 2 hours in many of the places. This is Neuwied. You can see how high the water level is there. They did have a marina off the side of the river we went into, going the wrong direction. And this is their current was very high there, but we went into there and then proceeded up the river to Koblenz And just past Koblenz and the huge castles along the side, we got up to the place where the Lorelei locks are, and just south of there, there is a marina, and you can prepare for the journey up there. These signs show little chevrons with little triangles, are signals showing what's coming down the river so that you have some warning. But the AIS works better in our experience. Ultimately, we got up very near a camp, and someone on shore took our picture and mailed it to us, which we were grateful for. But it shows to the right, you can see the same place that we saw just there, the weir that comes out. And you can see the green buoy. It's really pouring through there, and this is one of the steepest parts. This is going into the gorge, the Rhine Gorge, and the Lorelei. We didn't have time to look around for the statue. There's a statue of the maiden that in history used to lure sailors onto the rocks. This vessel coming downstream, they're limited to be 15 miles per hour. We're doing maybe 1 knot. And that green marker you see ahead is our marker that we have to take on the starboard side. And he's basically swinging out around that. So a lot of it, you're really worried and hoping they're in control of their vessels. But this is one of the areas where there were rocks. We made it through there and we were so happy. We said, let's celebrate. We took a picture, went to the store and bought wine. We bought about 33 bottles, and wine country everywhere there. And the Moselle wine is just wonderful. Finally, we're at the main river, and you can pull in this beautiful lake, and a wonderful yacht club that honored us with awarding us a set of mugs. And we learned from someone that had come up the river from the other way. And he said, well, in Hungary, he says, you can't take any wine. You can have maybe 2 bottles. And we thought, oh my God, we've bought 32 bottles of wine. Of course, it was only like €4 max, and it was wonderful. But so we proceeded to drink at least 1 bottle of wine every night so we wouldn't have to throw it away when we got to Hungary. We later learned that's only if it's non-European wine, sadly. Anyway, we proceeded on, and this again is a peggle that shows what the height and depth of the river is. At this point, we were so overjoyed because we're past the steep parts, and now we're on the main, and it's dammed the whole way, so that you're basically in a lake each trip you're making on this. This is where the cruise ships, passenger ships, really ply the water. So you can pitch in here too. This is me taking a little nap. Anyway, Frankfurt, huge city, no marinas that we could find. We did find one little marina we tried to pull in, and they started screaming at us and said, no, no, and waving their hands, say, you'll ruin our docks, you're too big, you're too big. So we had to continue on. Finally, we found a gravel pit, and it was marked with the appropriate sign saying you could tie up by the river. So we tied fore and aft, and then I took an anchor and took it out to the starboard side into the current and tightened it up to hold the boat off the shore. And we stayed there, slept for the night very well, and thought, well, you can't stop in the river ever. Next morning, that's the aft line showing it in the river there. Next morning, we wake up and looking out of our front window, we saw this. And this is, obviously you can anchor. He was anchored in the river at the time and just getting underway. Again, through Frankfurt. And now we're proceeding through locks. And again, you have to be sharp. And at the locks, they're speaking German. So Sue ended up figuring the words for do we follow X and Y into the locks, because the pleasure boats are always last. And and she'd ask yeah or nein, because otherwise we wouldn't understand what they were saying. But you can see the size of the vessels. This is after we've left one of the locks. The castles are just beautiful, and you can see below that, you can see the cruise ships with their passengers. Beautiful towns, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful places to visit. Unfortunately, we were trying to get to Turkey, get to the Black Sea, and we needed to get there. We understood that we had to be there before the end of August. And we're trying to get through here, not knowing how long it will take. But here you can see to the side all the cruise ships. We'd love to have stopped, but we could not. We did have one pleasure boat come up behind us, and this is the only one we saw on our trip. And they motioned that they wanted to exchange cameras. So we took theirs and took their picture, and they gave us theirs. So we gave them ours so we could have them take our picture, wondering what we looked like. And we found we looked like Ma and Pa Kettle on the river. You can see the beautiful hills as you're going through here. This is one of the original public works projects you can see there. This was built between 1933 and 1936. Hitler and their government was trying to build the canal at that time for commercial transportation and freight, but they did not complete the project. It wasn't finished until 1992, is my understanding, is the first time it was possible to go through this in a boat. And again, you can see the River Empress out of Basel, Switzerland, a beautiful cruise ship. You can see the lights to the right that indicate that it's permissible to enter into the lock at this time. It's beautiful country. It was just really a nice day. We were able to do our a decent speed. We didn't try and go fast because we were enjoying it too much, but all engine, of course. And one little small boat harbor that was on the river, and proceeded on through. And one of the problems we have, they have these docks, and you have to be able to tie your own boat up, the locks, excuse me, not docks. Thank you, honey. And here you can see Sue. What we did, we figured out a way to tape with 3M tape, the paper tape the line onto the boat pole. And that lets you get lots of length, because these are 8 feet apart in many places. So Sue could get that while I was running the boat and trying to get us close, and she could get the line on and then pull back the boat pole, which would tear the tape, and we'd be up to it tight. I'd shut the engine down and go up and give her a hand with the lines.
You have to stop because the barge is right in front of you.
Yes, the barges all go in first. They tie up their line, and we have to get tied up immediately because they usually turned on their engines to try and tighten their lines, and it would cause the water behind there to swirl. I don't know how many of you saw back in the 90s, there was a video of frog in the blender, and that's what you felt like. We had one at the start before we started using this method where we ended up turning 90 degrees in the lock, which was bad. Continue on through Germany, through the Main, into Austria. Cars going towards the larger part of Europe. You can see ahead again, people vacationing and kayaking in the middle of the of the Main. And you can see we're now going down. Beautiful, beautiful facilities all the way. We finally get to Vienna, and many boats stopped there, and we did stop there. Unfortunately, the opera was not playing, and their stallions were out of town for the summer, but it was a beautiful place to visit and see the scenery. We pulled into the Marina Wien, which is their way of spelling Vienna, and one of the producers of the nightly news for the country of Austria was there, and he insisted he had to show us. So he interviewed us in German, and then in English, yeah. And then when we saw it that night, it was done in perfect German, that we understood it was perfect German because we were speaking it, but we didn't understand a bit of it. And he had us take Angel Louise out and come back in, so he had video. We were on for a minute and 40 seconds on the national news. These are some of the places, the sites in Vienna. Vienna turns its back to the river. It doesn't really have a lot on the river that goes on. The city is off to the side. This is one thing we did see crossing a stream inside the main river. There was a swimming pool on a barge. Beautiful cathedrals. It was just a wonderful place. And they have the original Budweiser beer. This is the producer of that program that we were on. We proceeded after we left there to move on the river, and zoomed by us. We ended up getting to Bratislava. Beautiful place. I had no idea it was that nice. And this is from the castle. And then they had all kinds of artwork throughout the city that was just very beautiful. Then when we left, this is the canal going out of it. All the people seem to come to watch. And when here you can see the where it's being lowered. Finally, we go out, so you can see how much water is backed up at it. We were at the level of the people up there at the start. We proceeded on. We learned wonderful, wonderful rattlers, continued down the river through Hungary. And then eventually we got to Budapest, spent time in the city. Buda and Pest were joined together in the turn about 1900 by the two mayors that decided it'd be better. This is looking upwards on the river. Yes, this is the opera company. They were out of town, not playing. That's me at the side. And I'm wearing a shirt that's one of the only things I carried with me from the Department of Justice. I would wear that whenever we were going to see any officials or had people approaching the boat that had guns on their hips. And they tended to treat us very good. Beautiful palace and legislature there. Just a wonderful, wonderful city. GE has a huge production plant there. Just a wonderful place to visit. Sue is one of the few people I know that ran over herself with her own Segway. So we got to see a hospital close up. When you get in the emergency room to get an x-ray, the doctor wanted an x-ray, and they said, well, you've got to hand a 50 euro note through the door before you can go in. And here I'm looking at the book trying to find any marinas downstream. And this is coming out of a lock. Some boat caught fire and it foamed it. Anyway, this is an example of one of the vessels that you see all the time, and he passed us. I have a moving video of him passing us, but they had 3 cars on it. Anyway, Sue found a little place in Bamberg, Germany, and we went into Bamberg.
We take up 2 of the docks.
Yes, there's 2 docks that we take up, and they didn't say anything in English, but motioned to us to come in. We tied up, and we were there for a week. And this is the original home of the Holy Roman Empire in Germany, and just the best food you could ever wonder. This shows what our path on the river had been. At the left, you can see Frankfurt, and we're at Bamberg. Bamberg is where they start the Europa Canal that goes from Bamberg, and then it goes to the south through Nuremberg, you can see in the middle of the map, and all the way down to the Rhine River, which then goes through Regensburg and on to the Black Sea. This town had similar hills to the ones in Rome. We were celebrating there in Stettfeld, which one of my friends had relatives that owned a brew house there, and his dad came from that country. Anyway, I'm wearing my Department of Justice shirt. We may have been to some part of the officialdom there for that day. Let's see if I can get this to come back. And then we entered the MDK Canal, the main Donau Canal, known as the Europa Canal. This goes over the highest altitude in the world that you can take a boat over on its own bottom. And this shows the example. It's at the summit. You can see Bamberg just to the left, Nuremberg, and then Bamberg, Nuremberg, and then the summit, and then it goes down to Kelheim, where there's a marina on the other side. But you're going up very high. Some of the higher locks we've ever seen. There's a Wilson lock that goes up over 90 feet in Alabama on the Tennessee River that is similar to some of these. And you can see the locks that you're going through here lift up, and you go under the lock gate. They use something in the tune of 80 to 85% of the water, and it's recycled to be used over and over because they're at the Continental Divide, near the Continental Divide of Europe. You can see this one. You can see the there's 6 set of bollards that you have to tie your boat to, and then retie it.
No. The tall locks had the floating bollards.
Okay, well
so you had to get them.
Sue thinks this one may have had floating bollards next to the manual ones.
That's the whole
but
thing up there.
The manual ones here, you can see some of them were manual before we got to the floating bollards. It made a huge difference. But here you can see going in, water would drip on you and your boat. And here you can see up the side.
Floating.
Sue thinks this is a floating one. I'm not sure. Anyway, a small marina as we went through. This was another Cadillac that was in the middle of Germany. Small design. Ours is a 12 meter. And you can see the place there and see the distances. Nuremberg was 29 kilometers and back on the other side. If we had done it right, we would have stayed at some place like this and rented a vehicle and traveled on land, because we ended up getting out maybe 30 days quicker than we needed to get out of Europe, and we really missed seeing a lot. And if I did it again, I'd do it that way, so I had a vehicle. We quickly found, leaving some of these places, they'd have signs, and we could not read quick enough to see what they were warning us of. So we started to take pictures of any signs, and then we could read them at our leisure over the next 3 or 4 minutes to see what they were telling us. The MDK Canal at the top, at the summit, goes over the tops of highways, streams, cities. It's an amazing, fun thing. It's a miracle of science. This puzzled us so much. So this was in Nuremberg. We went by on the MDK Canal, And we can't see how that could have possibly gotten to Germany, in the middle of Germany from New Orleans. It says Mississippi Queen, New Orleans. But here we're getting down to some of the higher ones. You can see this is Leerstetten, and the light is red there, which says you cannot enter. We would tie up a great distance back, let the other vessels in, and then we'd go in. We were surprised that the other vessels did not seem to use their radios, though, which surprised us. They may have been in some other way of direct communication with the locks. This is a moving bollard, and from that point on, we had moving bollards that you can see that you tie on to, and it will float. Our equipment would all go off, scream, and finally we got to the summit, and you can see the height of some of these structures. And this is the structure of the highest point in the world that we floated through on June 27th, 1,337 feet above sea level. And you can see the line there, and one way you're going to the Donau, which is their word for Danube, and the other way to the Rhine. And we were going towards the Donau. And you can see our boat tied up. There was a ferry boat tie up there, and we took advantage of its open structure to be able to use it. And finally to Kelheim, the joint junction of the river. To the right is the canal, and to the left is the Rhine, excuse me, the Danube River. We're on the Danube River, and to the right is the MDK Canal, and behind us. And so we went in there. You can tell you're in Germany when you're there. They have some wonderful facilities. This was a great marina, except we couldn't get off the dock without people insisting we had to join them drinking schnapps in our honor. It's the only place I've ever seen where they had tank speed limits. And then we got to the Steinerbrook, which is a bridge built in the 12th century. It was the oldest bridge, stone bridge in the post-Roman time.
Wow.
This was the border of the Roman Empire. You can see where the castles were all along it. And these are pictures taken at Regensburg, I think, I'm not sure. But we're going down now. You can see we're continuing to go down.
How tight it is for the coasters.
Yes, it's built obviously just for this purpose of locks and hospitality. And finally, we got to the place that we thought there'd be a place to land, and there wasn't. This is Valhalla, and Valhalla has the German national cultural heroes, but they don't have docks on the river. You have to drive there.
You can't anchor.
And you cannot anchor there. At least we could not find any way to. There was a dock for ferries, but that was the only one. This says that the front one, this is the 70 system that we had licenses for, but the first one says attention, and then it says no passing, and then the right one shows that you switch lanes. If you're going to be continuing forward, you're going to have to go to the left bank. This is 2,394 kilometers to the Black Sea. The tide is much less, but it's pushing us. And that's the bicycle ship.
Can you do your mute all again, please?
Got it. Anyway, the bicycle ship looked fabulous. And there were bike paths all along here. I thought that was rather wonderful. Showing the place. This is one of their typical marinas. You can see here down at the bottom left of the screen at Pyrorang. And we went in, into there, and people were very friendly. It was like a weekend night, and they were just wonderful to us. We've got pictures of Budapest again, and Sue saying bye to Budapest. I don't know, we got some corruption of my file here. Finally, we, after Budapest in Hungary, we left that, and we found out we added a snake. We didn't learn that until one full day later. And after we learned about it, it scared the crap out of Sue's husband. Anyway, here you see the customs. They had to call us to come back there. We hadn't seen it. This is the end of the EU Schengen territory. And they checked us out. It took us 2 hours of checking. Then they all came down to the dock, about 5 of them, and said, you can go, and didn't come aboard or inspect or anything else. And we think a snake got on board from that roof. We had one window behind the inside steering helm, and that's where we think it came. This you can see showing that May 22nd, we entered at Amsterdam, and it shows that we went out on July 20th at Mohawks. And we continued on Serbia, not knowing we had a snake. And then Sue came out one morning after we'd anchored and said, there's either a real big lizard or a snake under the stove, that the tail was sticking out. I had it on autopilot. The river was about just under a half mile wide at the time. I walked in, and he was just crawling up and getting under the table. That's the picture we got of him. He was about 39 inches long. I didn't measure him, but that's what it looked like to me. And you can see he's rather a thin little guy, but he had a head and he hissed. Here I am.
Notice who's getting the snake.
Sue is getting the snake. She's got our handicap grabbers. We think that's one thing that we liked having on the boat, simply because it gave some, we had a number of times we used it to pick up stuff under the engine and in the bilge. It originally pulled a cell phone out of an old bilge on a prior boat. Sue got it. I was going to get one of the best pictures ever. She didn't know I was this close behind her. As soon as she grabbed the snake and turned around, it was right in my face, and I climbed the radar trying to get away so fast I forgot to take a picture. Continued down through Serbia, bomb damage, war damage. They were very friendly though. We worried about it. We lost an engine before that day was up, the snake, and then we had the engine. The next night, I had friends that were cruisers in the US, and they said, why don't you record the sound from the engine? And maybe if you play it, we can tell what's going on. They could not figure any fix from what they heard. So we continued on just one engine and proceeded on down the river. Again, bridges blown out. And you can see the Danube was getting shallower. This is one of the dredges that they had. That's
outside of Belgrade.
Yeah, Belgrade, downriver in the distance. And dredged. Looked like a lot of poverty there. We went to a restaurant that had been recommended to us by another cruiser. If you are in England, join the Cruising Association. It is a wonderful, wonderful group, and there are tons of lectures and a lot of people that have done different cruises, and some that had been on the river. They joined from a catamaran coming out of Germany. Anyway, this Vodonica, let us tie up the dock, wonderful guy, and ultimately 2 other boats came and joined us. And you can see there's a gangplank. Ultimately, we needed to get fuel. So he ended up arranging, that's him in the yellow up there, for someone to bring a panel truck with a big livestock plastic container. We took it to a petroleum station and we filled it with diesel. And the owner supplied a hose. He had a hose that must have been 100 feet long, and he tied it up to the bottom of the tank full of diesel. He ran it down the dock to his restaurant at about 11 in the morning, ran it past his wine bar and past his tables and across his outdoor deck and onto our boats. And we filled up with fuel, which we were very grateful for. This is the engine that we'd had trouble with. We had a diver come and he found that we'd wrapped something around it. It had caused damage. And ultimately we found that one of the pistons would not completely come to the correct level. It was off by maybe
The journalism.
1/16 of an inch or so. And the journal, ultimately we learned it was a journal. We spent a lot of time trying to figure it out and found out we couldn't. We stayed tied up there after the others left. I got a call that my oldest son was dying. So we got a plane to fly out of there, and we were gone for four weeks. Ultimately got underway again. And we went down. We had a boat captain saying we could tie up to him as we left this lock after Belgrade. Unfortunately, we never caught up to him, and we could not tell where he was because I forgot to use the AIS. Anyway, we traveled on. We knew that if we got to the Black Sea that we would be okay. So we're traveling. There was a canal that got named the Canal of Death because about anywhere between 20,000 to 200,000 people were killed under Ceausescu. We had a concern about getting there. The river was running too low. They were very shallow. There were gypsy pirates at the bottom of the river, and we were very, very concerned. And we knew we were going to have to put the mast back up when we got out of the river. We went through the iron gates, which were all flooded hundreds of feet deep, and national treasures were buried under them. A lot of archaeology through some pretty country. We proceeded through there all the way, and you can see the Serbian flag. The depth, 163 feet. You get to a place where you can see Decebalus, I believe is his name, that held out for 2 years against the Romans. And that's why this is called ultimately Romania. I guess it's Romania we're in now. And he ultimately probably lost his head. And then on the other side is a monument to Trajan. And it was moved, both it and another monument was moved from the bottom up to above the water level. We docked at a family there that let us stay at their home after we inquired, proceeded on down through the water to a huge giant bridge, which you could either be in Bulgaria or in Romania. Thank you, honey. Anyway, we did not have a stamp into Bulgaria, but that was the only side of the thing open. They would never talk to us. We had only one engine. We had managed to tie up and wait for everything, and we waited for about 2 hours, and finally 2 ships came. And the second ship, a Russian ship, the captain called us and said, "They want you to come in after us." And so we said, fine. And we went in after him, and they had a double set of locks. The people there and the captain came out to see us and were very friendly and talking to us. We went through both sets of locks. You can see the vessels on both sides. Ultimately coming out, and we proceeded on down the river, finding a place where it said that there was unexploded ordnance in the river, and be careful, caused us concern. The river was going shallow. We worried about 2 vessels we saw on the shore that were substantial vessels. We continued on. You can see it's a very poor country. We just anchored in the river at night, hoping for the best, but a little bit concerned. And we proceeded on. Ultimately, we found this barge at one of the spots on the river, and it broke up because it hit sand. Anyway, we were in the river. We ended up using our AIS to find the track. But before that, we had bungled across into Bulgaria, and they immediately sent out river police, border police, and they were going to arrest us. And then he didn't say we was. No, why don't you tell a story?
He wanted to see our passports, and he told us we were in Bulgarian waters and we hadn't checked into Bulgaria. Anyway, we convinced him that we were on the river, and he conveyed to us that it was very dangerous ahead of us and motioned for us to follow him. And he led us zigzagging across the river, avoiding the low spots and the sandbars that had changed with the water and the low water. And at the end, he came back to the boat and he said, okay, you're fine. We go this way, you go that way, bye-bye.
It was an hour and 40 minutes that they helped us, carrying us into Romanian waters where we were legal and through Bulgarian waters, sometimes right up against the shore where trees were. But here you can see some of the marks that we'd made from prior 5 miles away so that we knew where we could go. Ultimately, we got into Romania. There was a warning on the map at one point saying be cautious because of pirates. Some wonderful, beautiful gold-domed churches that were in these are in the I don't know what to call it, the Romanian area, and there were people that on two other boats we heard. One had its dinghy stolen there at night while under anchor, and another had people come on top of the boat. They tried to go to the police, and the police were in a double wire place with police attack dogs all on the outside. Finally, we got to the place where the Canal of Death starts right over Sue's Head, and you can see to the right, there's a bridge that was built on the Danube that was built by the same builder of the Eiffel Tower. The Saravoda is the name of the town. This was a police barge, and we were able to tie up to it overnight. We continued following down the Canal of Death. It was a 5-hour trip, went through some canals and locks, and proceeded through there, saw watchtowers that had been active in the 50s, and made it all the way down. A monument to the people that built it. They ended up executing 4 engineers after Ceausescu was thrown out of government by revolt. And again, finally, we made it to the end of the canal and the edge of the Black Sea, Constanta, and we went up to Port Thomas. And so when we got in there, we were held too long. There was no way we were going to go out in the Black Sea and go north 20 miles in dark with no moon. And the port captain said, "Don't worry, we won't charge you. You can just take berth number 2 there's already a boat in berth 1. You'll just be next to him. That's berth 1. And so we pulled up to the left of him and tied up overnight. Anyway, ultimately we got up to Port Thomas, which is where the poet Ovid had been exiled, and I think spent the last 6 or 8 years of his life. That boat had been thrown up there in the ice over the winter and fell off the stands. And we ended up finding other cruisers there that had come up from the Mediterranean going the other way, and they helped us get our mast up, other cruisers, and took a picture at the end of August. So we were going to be able to get out. Left the first time available and headed on out, heading for Istanbul. And here we are arriving at Istanbul. This is extremely early in the morning. It's something like 2 in the morning. We just chose to sail in a holding pattern until the sky was light and figured we'd go in at that time. We wanted to be safe. But these are all the vessels that are waiting to go through the Bosporus, which we had heard about in all of our history. And it was amazing. Morning, and we headed in. There was plenty of space to the side of these vessels all going in. We went in through into Istanbul. We ended up in a little place called Avcılar, which had some friendly fishermen. This is the going through the main city, through the Bosporus. And ultimately, here we are in a friendly little port. There was no space at all there, but someone had a milk carton, milk bottle in the middle that was tied to a line. Yes, and we took that, and we had a person on one of these commercial ships that Dee and Don, Wagaman, had called and knew the person, and he tried to get it fixed, but ultimately couldn't, and we decided we were going to have to get a new engine, which we did. And had some Turkish mechanics come. They arrived, and within 15 minutes of arrival, had this engine out of the boat. That's the first of 2 engines we lost during our trip. We think we ran it too slow, and there was an oil problem at some point on the trip. And during the time, this wouldn't have been there. This is Ephesus. This is in the winter after that. Yeah, after we got to Marmaris, Turkey, we came back and toured many of the ancient biblical spots. This is where the book of Ephesians had been done. Anyway, we got through all the way to Marmaris, left Turkey, and headed out to the island of Symi in the Greek islands, one of the most beautiful, simple little villages I've ever seen. It was just so wonderful. See Angel Louise there. We had a crossing over towards trying to get to Athens so we could walk the Parthenon. And I was a history major. We proceeded over there to a place just outside, but we had to go in here. We tied up and anchored. We didn't tie up, we anchored. And there was going to be a blow with up to 50 knot winds. And we were here for a good 5 days. But the day we pulled in, right after us, within an hour, we saw another boat. And the other boat was, this is Angel Louise, but the other boat was friends of ours from Nuremberg, Germany, that we had met in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And we had taken them to the Causeway Cafe in Gloucester, our favorite place of seafood anywhere in the world. And they were there, and you can see their boat next to us. And we spent the next 4 weeks cruising together. And this was just a wonderful place. We got up on this ridge, but then Sue and I, we're both in our 70s now, but we couldn't figure how to get down without
There was
hurting
no
ourselves.
path.
There was no path, but we managed to get down. We were able to leave, and we left there, left past Paros and went all the way back to a little place just to the south of Athens. But again, we're subject to a 90-day time in any 180 days. And we had already spent our time in Marmaris. It's not in the EU or in Schengen, but we went back to Germany for 21 days, to Germany, Switzerland, and France. So we only had
Would you
69 days. Crossed the Aegean Sea, the Suez, and went into the port of Hierapolis at 600 BC, was the height of medicine in the world. Went up by bus to the Acropolis and then went through the Corinthian Canal. That's the ancient town. And through the Corinth Canal and in the Gulf of Corinth. And we stopped at the top of the location where previously all of the young gals told the history of Europe. And finally left. Beautiful place, beautiful cruising all through this central area. You can see the dots where we stopped. Ultimately made it to the home of, to the port of Ithaca. And we stayed there for just a couple days, filled up with fuel, and crossed over, headed for Syracuse and in Sicily, in southern Italy, on the just off the nose, the toe. Anyway, went through the Ionian Sea. We did not go north. And this is one of the things we like about the AIS. We can see the name of any vessel and where they are, and see the closest time of approach and how far we'll be from them, and see the weather as well. You can see the rain in the area there. There's my Angel. Our boat's named Angel Louise. We anchored first, and then this boat in front of us anchored. It was a 330-foot long motor vessel, and he couldn't get all of his stuff on his boat. So he has a support boat behind him, and that boat is 237 feet long, and it carries his helicopter and bigger speedboats, and I don't know what else.
We're the only boats anchored there. It was a big area.
Oh, in that close area, yes. Anyway, his boat was named Ace, 5 decks, and he had a garage underneath it to keep his runabout. And his support boat, you can see the speedboat on it, and helicopter and his other things. Anyway, we went into Syracuse. We loved it. We'd loved to have stayed there, but Schengen was running. We're losing days every day, obviously. Anyway, we stayed there for several days. Loved their market. They had a market that was like 2 blocks long. Just fabulous food and every kind of fruit, fish, meat, cheese, anything that you wanted. We had to get to London. We knew we were going to run out of all of our Schengen time, and so we told them we searched out and found where their border police were, and we said, we are going to Africa, and that's the only way they would let us check out and stop the clock from running. And this is the stamp in the passport. You can see we have gone out of Europe at Syracuse, and it shows on May 8th. And it shows that we had entered on April 13th. So we've run down a lot of time. Went to Malta, Sicily, Tunisia, Sardinia.
Sardinia, they did check. our passports for Schengen, and they did count up our days. And then they decided that we were okay. But that was the one place that they really did check for Schengen.
This is Malta. We left there after 1 day because it was $120 a day to stay at a wooden dock with no services and no power and no restrooms. Went across back to Sicily and went into Licata. They met us, let us into a beautiful little marina, and they told us it's free during the month of May because we're trying to entice people to stay here instead of what's the name where instead of it's where King spent the winter. Anyway, they offered a very, very good opportunity. If we'd been smart, we'd have stayed here. This is the port where General Patton entered Europe with the American forces, the first place American troops were fighting on Europe. Wonderful food. We had a great time there. This again is another picture of the city. You can see the dotted blue line where we left. We went down. Our weather said that there was going to be a terrific storm. So we turned left in the late in the evening and went across the Mediterranean over to Libya, Tunisia, and went into there. A storm did come through. We saw a boat sink in the harbor. Has a beautiful, beautiful fort all around it. And we stayed there for about 4 days and left, crossing over to Sardinia, not Sardinia, yes, Sardinia. Huge traffic area. And proceeded over. This is just the traffic going through there. Again, love that AIS. And we went up around the east side of Sardinia to the Gold Coast and around it. And this is a mussel fishing location, mussel farm. Met some wonderful French people there who we could not speak a word of French, and they couldn't speak any English, but we still correspond with them through use of translations. This is when we dropped our anchor there in the bottom. We wanted to check it before we set it, and just very clear water. This is through about 8 feet of water. We crossed then across the Tyrrhenian Sea over to the Balearic Islands that are Spanish islands, and we had a reading on my oil pressure that looked weird, so I took it into Mahone, and one of the mechanics said, well, I don't see any problem with your engine. Anyway, so I decided to change the oil, and when I changed the oil, this is what I found, which looked like to me, this is the old engine, not the one that was replaced. And I thought, I don't want to spend any money repairing an old engine. So I found a place, and they said they would get me one at a great discount. And we bought another engine, had a very heavy MasterCard for quite a while after that. But this milkshake color, I think, is from the water mixing with the oil.
Engine came from Barcelona.
And this engine, yeah, came out of Barcelona. And we named this engine Barcelona, and the other is named Istanbul. And it was put in one morning, did a great job, and ran well. And we went in to see if we could extend our Schengen time. We tried one other time. No, they will not give you an extension at all. He said, there's 14 days left on your time from southern Spain. He says, you could easily fly back to London in that time. I said, but our boat. He says, well, I'm sorry, you can't do anything. Anyway, our time was running out. We had the Schengen problem. We decided to go fly our quarantine flag, and we told the immigration people, we're going to Morocco. And we had to check in there so that we could buy the engine. We checked out again, and we left. We went down through the Balearic Islands, which would be a wonderful place to spend a whole summer. And we went to a place called Mar Menor, which means small sea. And just inside the ocean is a small salty sea that is just a beautiful place. The Air Force Academy is there, and it's just to the north of Cartagena for any people that have ever been to the port of Cartagena in southern Spain. Anyway, we left there after the weather cleared. We headed to Gibraltar, and the weather had cleared. We couldn't decide when to go, but finally decided it's going to be good. And we thought we might have to go to Morocco, but we didn't. We continued on to Gibraltar. We called Gibraltar. This is going into Mar Menor. The slides are out of the order, I'm sorry. And this is when we're leaving. So whole areas have a lot of British retirees, and this is headed towards Gibraltar. And finally, we got to Gibraltar. And Queensway Quay, one of two big marinas there, said they would take us in, and they said they would let us stay for the winter. We climbed up the outside of the Rock of Gibraltar, beautiful place, and then walked back down, and crossed over to Europe. You have to go outside of Europe, Morocco, excuse me. We crossed over to Morocco to renew our VAT exemption. Every 18 months, a foreigner must go out, or you will end up paying something in the range of, depending what state you're in, between 16 to 20% of your boat's value. And I've heard they use the new value of the boat for the VAT tax. But since we went to Morocco, we were no longer worried about that. This is Morocco, Smir, Morocco. Continued after going through there at sea up to the port at Mazagon. This is the port that Columbus left when he did his first trip. And at the junction of the Rio Tinto River is where he was. And today there's a big monument there to Columbus. And at the side of that, there's a EU of the 3 ships that sit there. We then left around the peninsula to the North Atlantic, stopping in Lisbon, Porto, staying within 100-foot depths, stopping Bayona, Spain, where one of Columbus's ships returned to after going to the New World, and up through the Bay of Biscay to Belle-Île, France, which is a beautiful place. They jammed the boats in the river, and after all the boats are in there all the way across, they close the locks. The next morning, they open the locks to let this big ship come through to deliver fuel, and they close the locks. You can see our mast in the foreground, and all the boats there have to stay away from that vessel. And you can see the fort that's dammed in there, people walking across the place the boats were navigating earlier. Beautiful fort here. Continued out of there up through the coast south of on the east coast of France, a place called the Raz, and it's terrific current, and it just whipsaws you. And we tried to go through. We thought, we've got 2 new engines, why can't we get through here? But it stopped us dead in our tracks. And so we just turned around, and we only got as far as you can see down there that put marks on the map to guide us. And we ended up turning around and going back and just cruising circles for another 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours to wait to be able to go with it pushing us rather than pulling us or against us. Nighttime at sea inside Angel Louise. This is our navigation instruments. We made it into Brest, France, found the best moules and frites, as they say. Beautiful meal. and half the price of any other place in the area. And navigated to the English Channel, dreary day, and stopped in Alderney, bought wine for the winter, and went from there, saw the places of our heroes from the free world, the cemetery there, and the sign that the French put up there honoring, thanking their liberators. Across the channel through Leamington, Southampton for a haul out to Portsmouth. We followed an airship, oh, what do you call it? The
Airfoil.
airfoil vessel. And he showed up on my radar. I thought, well, I'll just follow his channel. He went up on the shore and I was a good distance behind him. I decided I better not follow him. And so I took the traditional way into the port. Went to Brighton, stopped there, stopped at Ramsgate, which is the Royal Harbor, and then went halfway up the river to Queensborough, stopping at Gravesend, which is the place where Pocahontas is buried, and proceeded up from there up to London. And the picture showing from Cherbourg on through fog, but we were still able to navigate using our AIS. And even though it was foggy, we knew where everything was going to be. Came into the Solent and through there, and finally got back home to London, England, and went into the locks and yes, St. Catherine's docks. These are a few of the things that we recommend and like. The aluminum Mariner D8 bikes, we recommend getting a bag for it as well. If you have that, you can put it on your shoulder. You don't have to worry about leaving it tied on the street, and you walk into any restaurant in New York City and you won't have a problem going to use the restaurant, and no one will be there with a power tool to take your bike because you'll have it with you inside. Additionally, we want to recommend CH. CH is the initial stand for cleans hoses. It is recommended by Raritan. It will absolutely dissolve scale and calcium that results from the collision of urine and seawater. And it is a 5-to-1 mix, so it goes a long, long way. You can get it from Defender US. You can't get it after you leave the United States. We would not go anywhere outside the US without it anymore. And then I wanted to show you one of the books that we thought was very good from Lonely Planet that you can use, and they have little PDFs that you can take, and you can use the one page so that at least you'll know how to start to do a greeting to people you see, that people are very friendly when you speak their language. Sue wanted to recommend the European Code of Inland Waterways, the 70 rules, and you can find that at the webpage, unece.org. And it's very interesting to see the difference. And again, the AIS, this is crossing the English Channel, but you can see, as long as you keep, you can click on a vessel and it will show their relative position relative to you. As long as you keep their dotted line off of your vessel, they are not going to hit you, and you can proceed on at full speed. And then finally, I think that that concludes what we wanted to present. I'm going to unmute everybody so we can take questions. King, if you want to unmute, I think you can push your, let's take this off.
I'm good.
Can you hear us, King?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone, and I think you may need to push your space bar to talk to unmute yourself. Does anyone have any questions for King and Sue, or my Sue and I? Sorry, I've droned on so long. And I can't see hands, so just speak up, say your name. I'm going to turn off screen sharing. Okay.
Hey, Ed, it's Dave
There-
here.
Yes, Steve.
Hey, Dave on Soggy Paws.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Dave. Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're talking to you from the Philippines, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning here. I guess it's 9 o'clock in the evening there. But anyway, just wanted to thank you all for doing this presentation. Wonderful job. Great pictures. And I was wondering if you thought you might want to put it on the website, and if so, maybe add a few comments in writing on some of the photos so that people know what they are. But there are a number of presentations from our GAMs on the website, and this would be a good one to add to that, particularly for us who may be coming to the Mediterranean in the next couple of years, so we can figure out where to go.
Certainly, certainly. And we are going to put it up, this recording, this has been recorded, so it will go on the website. But thank you, very good.
Ed, this is Rich and Gail Inman from Oriole. We're
Hi.
up here in just south of Annapolis, Maryland. Hey, one question we had early on is what's basically the minimum boat speed you're going to need when you're entering the Rhine with the current there?
Again, it depends if it's in flood or not. We had 4 people tell us, oh, you won't be able to make it up the Rhine. And we were prepared just to go up as far as we could and then turn around and come back. You end up, if you don't make it, you end up in Holland, and it's such a wonderful country too. But
the one thing about the Rhine is it's not the whole Rhine. It's the Rhine Gorge where all that current is.
that's the worst.
Yes, and then if you can make it through there. At one point where we showed the campground that was right down to the bank, the water was high that year. There was a guy in a yellow shirt on shore, and he waved to me. I was at the helm at that time, and I waved back at him. And it was several minutes. I looked over and I thought, wow, that guy is still there. And I thought, well, that means I'm still there. And I looked down and I was doing 1 knot,
1/10 of a knot.
0.1. And I really don't know if I was going forward or backwards. And it dawned on me, Ed had gone in to take a nap. And it dawned on me that I thought we were getting done and I should have been on the other side. So I kicked my engines up and got over and I was okay. But I was kind of complacent at that time.
As you get close to the weirs and the sides of it, it lets up. What was your experience, King?
Similar. I think if you have a boat that can do 6.5 under power normally, you can do it. As you guys were saying, it depends on which side of the river you're on. That makes a big difference. We had a situation where a barge passed us and said, if you go over here, you'll get less current. And at the time we were doing, I think, 0.4 knots. And in fact, it made a major difference. So I think that's part of the learning curve for doing this. But I think most sailboats, if they can do 6 or a little better under power, under most circumstances, can do this. The other big thing you mentioned is the current. We tracked the rise of the water and the lowering of the water, hoping to catch it correctly. In other words, where the water was ebbing, it was low, but we did not. And like you, our experience was 1 foot below flood stage. So we had a lot of current also on the Rhine. But you know, after the gorge, and before the gorge, you're pretty good.
Would you say that also that if it gets too bad, you can take the inside? We stayed on the right side almost all the way, I think. I don't think we crossed back and forth. I don't recall much anyway.
You can do that. I actually weaved for a while before I lost my nerve between the weirs, where the current really drops. At one point, we actually had ducks that were going faster than we were. But, you know, it's going to depend on the river, how it's running, where you are in the river, and what section of the river you're in. You're just going to have to expect in the gorge area, you're going to be slow. But the gorge is only 15 clicks, so you can do that in one day, even going pretty slow.
Any other questions or?
I got a comment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you know, we have freedom in Holland right now, but we've been cruising the interior for, I guess, 10 seasons now, 6 months to a year. But you know, last time we've been on the Rhine a couple of times, once all the way from Switzerland, you know, from Basel all the way to Holland. And I was working at the time in the summer, so I'd have to get the boat tied up, you know, for the summer. But now we have the boat back in Holland again, and we're going to go ahead and work our way across France. This will be our third time going to Strasbourg. And at Strasbourg, you just go down current, you know, to the main river. That's what last time we were on the Rhine, we came across Germany, and it was, 2 years ago, I guess. It's going on 2 years, I guess. But the river was so low that the barges were even rafted up and anchored. And the barges were running the river, they were running half load. And a lot of the marinas along the Rhine where we've been able to pull in before, the sand had just silted in. So we'd have to go into the commercial and tie alongside the big ships like you did as well. But anyway, the last time it was pretty exciting. One of my friends, you know, lives in Switzerland. Right now, he's in Vienna right now, going down the Rhine, but he's going to turn around and come back. And we'd also had reports, you know, other friends of ours we met in Switzerland, that they had been down the Rhine, but they always came back. There was always talk about pirates, you know, and Karen worries a lot about that. But, you know, we still have the eventual goal, you know, get the boat back to Strasbourg this year if we can get back to Europe again. And then, you know, go ahead and do it the easy way. But every time we turned to buck the current, I just said, boy, well, even when you were out of Arnhem, you know, we bucked the current to Arnhem to turn the corner there on the Rhine, you know, to go to Nijmegen. Incidentally, they're the best bike museum in the world right there at Arnhem or in Nijmegen. And a great little dock you can tie up to. In fact, I hit bottom there in the middle of the river. The river was so low last time we were in there. I hit bottom just before the bridge at Nijmegen, the new bridges they built. But
what kind of vessel? Can you tell us that, Bill?
Oh, this is a CT 40, or it's a Hunter 42. We draw 4'11", and we haven't any trouble at all getting around Europe. We've been down to the Med a couple of times. We left our mast in Marseille 10 years ago. It's still in storage there at Port Napoleon. And anyway, we really, you know, we did all the wine country, did the Moselle, you know, all the way down to, anyway, we've been 10 years cruising. And anyway, I really enjoyed your presentation because we have the, you know, goal of following in your wake. I don't know if we'll ever put the mask back on again, though. You know, we can have it shipped, of course, you know, from Marseille. There's trucking all the time, you know, going back and forth across Europe. But I'm not sure. I'm toying with the idea of picking it up. But our mast overhangs on both ends. You know, it's 63 feet. And so, you know, I just always worried about being in the locks, you know, because we've done over 1,000 locks in Europe so far. Wow. And we quit counting. You know, I remember one trip we did over 100 just in one leg out of Lyon.
We should have had you doing this lecture.
We were fortunate.
It's a lot of work to put package together like that. I sure appreciate it. I really do. And thanks a lot. I couldn't wait to hear it. There's a couple of blogs, you know, that make the trip. I haven't followed along on those all the way. But anyway, yeah, in fact, last year we flew. We have a boat in Montenegro as well. I'm sorry about that. We have one at Porto Montenegro. But we flew out of Montenegro and went to Vienna. Where else, Karen? Vienna. Yeah, Belgrade and Budapest. Yeah, I'm disappointed you missed those those shoes on the river at Budapest, on the Pest side, where the Germans, they killed over 30, I guess it was 20 or 30,000 people were shot behind the head, and they were dumped in the river right there, you know, on the Danube. And they have bronze shoes along the bank. But we flew there just to see what the water conditions are going to be like, you know, when we got the boat there. So anyway, you sure have broadened our horizons anyway. Thanks so much.
Well, it was dangerous for me trying to put it together. I've got health issues and shouldn't be getting too far from home. And Sue pointed out, I went in and told her, I said, you know, putting this together, I said, let's go back out. You know, we've got a person that wants to buy our boat that we're going to planning to sell it to. But I said, gosh, it's wonderful in Europe.
Oh yeah, we just love it. I can't wait to get back. I don't know if we're going to get back or not. They just freed up one of our friends, one of our British friends, you know, said that he's going to pick up his boat in Maastricht. You know, he stores it there at the factory. But anyway, we understand they're talking about the 15th in France of opening that up. But right now, Holland is opened up, but you can't fly in. And being Americans, you know, we have the worst pandemic situation of the rest of the world. So I don't know if they're ever going to let us fly into Europe.
It's a problem. It's a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? or
Yeah.
comments? Thank you very much. That's very kind of you, Bill. Thank you.
Ed, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
D. Strickland here. Yeah, I wonder do you know if you get a long-term visa, say for France, would that add time to your Schengen time?
Bingo. I was going to talk about it, but I should have King speak to that.
The way we did it was we became residents of Italy. And there are 4 countries that I'm aware of that do allow you to become residents. And that includes France, Spain, Italy, and Greece. There may be others. Once you become a resident, then you are not required to observe Schengen. You are basically outside of that portion of a treaty. There are no tax implications. There weren't for us. We didn't open a local bank account. I didn't earn money through Italy. So there were never any tax implications. We did have to reapply. First 2 times was every year, and then it flipped to a 2-year cycle. But that's how we got around Schengen. And I think that's several other people I know of have done that. It's more difficult now than it was before because we were able to use the marina as our address. Now I believe you have to have a physical on-land address. But I would definitely pursue it. You do it by applying to your local consulate or embassy in the US. Like our local consulate was in Miami. So we traveled to Miami, met with the officials, filled out the paperwork, submitted it, and they approved it and gave us what's called a type D. D as in David visa. That visa allows you unlimited access or entry and exit from Italy for a period of 1 year. Once you have a type D visa, then you apply for residency. And in Italy, you had to do it within a limited period of time of when you first entered Italy. In our case, it was 10 days. You had to apply for the residency. But once you've applied, then the clock stops and you're into you're outside of 90 days.
If I could make a comment, I had looked into that very heavily, and I could find no way to get any kind of a residence visa in any country without coming back to the United States. And I talked to many people and could not find a way to do it. But there may be a way.
Supposed to redo that Schengen, right?
Anyway, my experience and what I studied, and I'm a lawyer, so I looked at their legal documents as much as I could. And I observed that they had issues if you spent more than 180 days in other places than where you had your resident visa to. And in that case, if you were traveling to or from that place, they did not cause trouble, but otherwise you would. But I definitely regretted we never got a visa extension or some type. And what you need to remember is that the Schengen governs people only. It does not govern your boat. Your VAT tax is covered. That's what covers your boat, and the VAT tax can be up to, as I say, 17%, 19%. I've heard different countries give different quotations, which isn't small change if you figure your
Yeah,
boat's
there's a way to go around that one too, but it depends on the country you're in. Malta had a reputation of actually reducing the tax, but the EU cracked down on Malta. And I know of 2 American boats who actually went to Malta, and rather than negotiate the rate of a tax, which I believe is 18% in Malta, they negotiated the value of the boat. And they basically said to the officials, we have $6,000 for this, take it or we're leaving. And ultimately the officials took it. And they got their boat into Europe without having to worry about any further VAT issues.
But otherwise, you're given 18 months at a time that your boat doesn't have to have a worry about it. We had one other situation where it came up. Sue and I were on the Eastern Atlantic Rally, the Eastern Atlantic Rally. Anyway, going south along the Atlantic coast. No,
Oh, that one. Okay.
that's a different one.
Gotcha.
That's Mediterranean. Anyway, we had left London and we did not check in. We just flew the yellow flag when we went to sea. And we had the issue come up of how far, we could go. And we decided, to get back, because we were going to, the rally we were on went all the way down to the river between Portugal and Spain on the south. And we would not have enough time to do it. We'd run out of the 90 days before we finished that. So we elected to take a chance and just fly a yellow flag when we were in any port and not go ashore. And we did that all the way south until we got down to Lisbon. And then we decided in Lisbon, in Cascais, we decided, well, let's go check in. So we checked in there to start our time. But before we got down there, Sue's dad had been in ill health and was on his deathbed. He'd had a heart attack and wasn't supposed to last long. And we were on the boat, but you go to the airport, they're going to check your Schengen when you go through before you leave the country. And we would have had to have checked in. And I've heard of other people that said that was a definite problem, was where they got caught trying to go to the airport to leave or to come back. And you have to fly back to get to your boat if you're out of Schengen time. Some people, as I say, don't pay much attention to it and luck through the system. But if it catches you, you can be in a bad situation. And
where it catches you is if you have an accident, you rent a car, you have an accident, you come to the attention of the police, then they check your paperwork. I will give you one mistake that we made that could help you if you're going to cross, and that is when you go to the Azores, you are now into Europe proper and you're into Schengen. When you reach the Azores, make sure they check you out. They stop the clock, no matter where you're going. If you're going to Ireland, wherever you're going, have them check you out. they don't necessarily want to do that when they hear you're going to Ireland or to the Med, but you need to do that to stop the clock.
And we always told them we were going to a non-Schengen place. And so they were kind of caught up. And their philosophy was kind of like if you went into US Customs and you were in North Carolina and said, well, I'm going up to Maine. They'd say, well, you're in the United States. You don't check out to go to Maine, even though you're going by boat. But if you went into customs and said, well, I'm going to Bermuda, they'd stamp you out right then. And you can always say, well, I changed my mind and arrive in Maine and check in again if you were in time and so forth. But it's a difficult issue traveling. King actually was helping lobby on behalf of SSCA and other cruisers, OCC and SSCA, to try and get the EU Parliament to address the issues. And it was very difficult, and we could never get anything through. They originally put it in effect when they adopted it as a treaty, so everyone is stuck with it and can't change it with their own state laws. And it's a real problem for cruisers.
There's one other point to be made here, and that is that before Schengen, many countries had bilateral agreements with the US. And those agreements still are in place. Denmark is a case in point. And if you can find an official that will check you in under that agreement will supersede Schengen. So, but you have to really know what those agreements are, and then you have to find an official who actually knows them also.
That's a good point.
Right.
New Zealand has separate agreements with every country in Europe, I think 30 days in each country, which, if they gave us even just a little bit of time in each country, it'd be a lot better than a 90-day period in my book. But
yeah, if I could add, one of the dangers of that those pre-Schengen agreements the United States has with also with France and Poland.
Yes.
Your clock is still going. Your Schengen clock is still going. So you can do 6 months or 9 months in France. But if you leave France, the fact is you've been in the Schengen area for over 90 days out of that 180. So it catches people that way too. As long as you stay in France, you're fine. Or Denmark or Poland.
They've had a few people, I think, with the terrorism in the last few years that some of the places, I know they were debating setting up, roadblocks and stuff because of the terrorists' actions for identity. But I've been too far away from that, and I don't trust U.S. News to give actual facts to answer all those questions. Any other questions or comments?
Still worried about pirates.
Well, that was one thing I was going to also mention. We put in a extra long on our dinghy connection that runs through our gas tanks and all the way up to the front, and uses a painter, a big piece of, I don't know, about as big as my index finger, cable, that loop on it, that we lock our dinghy all the time. I've been involved in law enforcement for most of my life, and I don't think well of other people in too many cases. Anyway, we put that on our dinghy, but when I was at Cruising Association, several people talked about how terrible it was being in other countries, and from time to time they'd have people steal or disconnect their lines. And I guess the issue is that there's some malcontents everywhere, and you want to make sure you're as cautious as you can be without giving away too much of your freedom.
There was one place when we were in Romania where we had noticed that on the chart that it said pirates, and it was kind of a frightening time at first. And we were having to go around on the Borsia Arm, which was a longer route to get to Constanta because of the low water. And we were following the barge that ended up hitting the sandbar because of low water. And the two parts, the sides on the barges broke loose from the main one. But before that happened, it was very calm, and we're just looking, and all of a sudden, several small canoe-like boats came from shore, and it was amazing. I don't remember that they even had, I don't think they had motors.
Yeah, they did.
Did they? Okay. And they went to this barge that was right in front of us. And there were several of these that were coming, and they were going to both sides of the barge. And it was amazing to me of how fast they were on top of the barge. And those barges are really tall. I mean, the sides are tall. And they just got up on top. And I thought, what is going on? And I was afraid, you know, maybe they would start to come to our boat. And I got the binoculars out and started watching. And what happened was the barge was carrying like scrap wood and scrap metal. And I could see with the binoculars that some of the people that came up from those small boats had gone to the back of the ship, and they were giving them what I figured out was fish and fresh seafood. And in return, it appeared to be that they could take their pick of anything. They were just running on top, throwing wood and metal pieces down into their little boats. So it was evidently an agreement between the two there. But it was amazing how much they could throw down into those boats. I mean, there wasn't much of their boat showing above the water when they left.
The ship was bartering the cargo they were carrying for
Which is just scrap stuff.
bribery,
Yeah.
basically. Anyway, they broke apart, and the tug that was pushing them made trips all night coming back and forth. We ended up anchoring by the side of it, but we were concerned that we were in a dangerous area, but we just always lock up all the time. And it was no problem.
What are you looking for?
Any
My
other
list.
questions or
Right.
comments?
If we can, I'm going to stop the recording here.